What you're looking at here are the through bolts that go from one end to the other of the locomotive. You can see the nut and the thread on this end. We're going to have to do a little bit of replacing because they're somewhat deteriorated. In fact, I think it was done before by York Utilities also, because this is what really took the pull when they hooked onto freight cars. And we had to remove them because they were in the way of the work on the car. And what we will do is we will de-rust them and paint them and check the threads all out and then put it back in and it'll tie everything together. This is called a transom, and it goes across from one side of the truck to the other. It's simply a big heavy piece of channel. We weren't able to get exactly the same size. Steel shapes have changed somewhat. So we had, in order to get the width, so that this hole through which the bolt I just showed you goes, so it wasn't too close to the edge, we had to weld on this extra piece. So we had the width that was of the original up there. I mean, it's certainly plenty strong. There's no way that anything is going to deteriorate. But we sometimes have to make some compromises because in 100 years things do change. In fact, sometimes I'm wondering how lucky, I'm wondering how we're going to be able to get some of this stuff.
We're on.
What you see here is the truck frame after sandblasting all the parts, after painting them, and starting to reassemble. We replaced every single bolt and nut because the old ones, this is just a small sample, it's slightly deteriorated. And we then assembled everything, putting caulking between, because we have to do things a little bit more carefully than they did originally because our exposure is long-term. Having cars that just sit stationary for a long time means moisture can get into areas and it doesn't get dried out by motion. Most of this is original except for the bolts. However, the center part, there's a bolster sitting down in the middle. Underneath that is a spring plank. The spring plank is entirely new. It's surrounded by two channels, which are the transom, which go across. The bolster goes up and down between them, and it rests on full elliptic springs. These springs are getting harder and harder to get. You'd think they're very common and you could get them anywhere. Well, that's not true, and we had to look all over the place for them. And finally went to a place in East St. Louis, which made them specially for us. At the total cost was about $10,000 for 4 of them. And apparently it's a work of art to get them to come out right. Sir?
I'll let you,
handwork involved in these. They take the steel. We tell them what the original was, and then we, through various means, in this case taking the old, we had a set of old springs that wasn't too bad, put them in a press and to see how much pressure it took, which I think was about 5 tons.